Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, everybody, to Paranormal Geeks Radio. I couldn't remember exactly how that little music spot ended. I wasn't 100% sure whether it was over with or not, but I believe it is. But stand by. You might hear another oboe come in here and give us another serenade. But anyway, welcome to Paranormal Geeks Radio, this special Friday night UFO special. This will be about the Phoenix Lights, the lights over Phoenix. It was 17 years and 15 days ago, on March 13th, 1997, that thousands of Arizona residents from Phoenix to Tucson saw the lights in the shape of a triangle float quietly across the night sky. Almost immediately, phones started ringing at TV and radio stations and at police departments in the area. Luke Air Force Base was contacted, but they knew nothing of the lights. What is behind the mysterious lights over Arizona? With the help of tonight's only one, I hope we can shed some light on this paranormal Arizona night. I'd like to bring on our guest tonight. His name is Jim Kelly. He used to be the Maricopa County MUFON director at the time this happened, so I'm sure we're going to hear some interesting stories tonight. Jim, welcome to Paranormal Geeks Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim.
I have to turn my page here. I misspoke in the introduction that these lights were seen from Phoenix to Tucson. These were actually first picked up near Walton, Nevada, and seen almost the whole length of Arizona, or at an angle across Arizona.
Yes, they traveled south. I believe one of the earliest sightings was Walton, which is right on the border there, or close to the border, and they traveled south into Phoenix towards Tucson. There was many sightings that night in that little window of time between, probably, depending on where you were in the state, probably between 8:30 and 10 was the most active sighting cycle, right in between there, of a giant V-shaped craft.
A lot of people don't realize that there were actually two separate incidents that night, and I think the main one with the craft actually being seen going across the city and across the desert is kind of lost in the media blitz of the flares that were seen over the mountains. They're south. What is that? Be south, kind of west or southwest of Phoenix.
Yes, they call them the Australia Mountains. That's kind of where they were sighted at, near Phoenix. The Australia Mountains, which is kind of southwest, depending on where you are in the valley. But that's kind of where they were. People believed, when they saw these lights in the sky, that it was like a giant mothership because of the way it looked. It was huge. And again, It was depending on where you were in the valley, because there's mountains surrounding the valley all over the place. So, basically when the event happened, a lot of people called into Peter Davenport's site, UFO reporting, and they reported the sightings, but it really didn't go national until months later, until the USA Today posted an article about the Phoenix lights, and that's when the whole media frenzy really exploded about the case.
Because like I say, with the two separate incidents, everybody was already looking up, and everybody was talking about the flares, and it seems like that's where really the story just died. It was flares, that's all it is. And the other, like I say, the part with the craft just kind of got swept under the rug. I guess we have our media to thank for that.
Well, it's in the media's defense, and believe me, I'm not defending them, because I'm like one of the worst. I'm so critical of the media concerning reporting on anything paranormal, whether it's UFO, ghosts. They just don't know how to do it, because number one, they don't know who to go to. Okay, they tend to gravitate towards media type figures in the paranormal field, and they don't necessarily realize if that person is credible or not. So they usually parade around a lot of very uncredible people in the fields, and that's a problem that's been for so long in the UFO field. Now it's in the ghost field. Now, particularly in the Bigfoot field, the same thing is happening. They're gravitating towards media people, instead of the real experts. So what they did is, and what the media will do is, if there's something, that they have some type of video footage, whether it's, regardless if it's flare footage or a real UFO, they'll show it. And then they'll parade the facts of the case, because they have to show something when they're doing a story. That's just how it is. But it was the community around here was buzzing about it months later when it finally broke out. And then we had all these witnesses coming out, reporting what they had seen. And we tend to think that the witnesses that reported it the first week that it happened are more credible than the witness testimony that reported it later on. So we kind of center on that more than we do the later, reports.
Yeah, now we're like I said, thousands and thousands of people have saw this, and at the time you were the acting. You were not the acting, but you were the MUFON director for Maricopa County.
I wasn't the state director. I was the Maricopa County section director,
right.
Which is right. And I wasn't the state director then. I was a Maricopa County section director right after the lights. What happened during the Phoenix Lights episode, I was an investigator in training for MUFON. And it was shortly after the incident, the Phoenix Lights incident, I became Maricopa County section director for a number of years. And my sector was Maricopa County which is the Phoenix area. Okay. And but I was there, and I actually saw I saw our chief investigator, Richard Montzer. He was the one that did all the video analysis of the tapes, and I was there watching him do it. He explained to me what he was doing, and I was also there to see the debates on radio, on coast to coast, the local radio, colleges. We debated the other side in colleges. We were just trying to get the correct information out to the public.
Right.
And we weren't able to, because I think a lot of people, just my own opinion here, a lot of people had videotapes of the flare footage, and they were trying to sell it as, to the various cable channels so they could get money. Right. We saw that right off. We had a couple of videotapes donated to MUFON from people who took footage. That's how we were able to analyze it. I should say Richard was able to analyze it. And when he came out with his... Well, when he came out with his official report, there was a backlash from the community because they didn't believe it was flares. And, he was literally lambasted. And it actually drove him out of MUFON eventually. He just had, he was actually getting threats, and I can testify to this. He actually showed me threatening letters from people. And he got so frustrated with the UFO community because he presented the facts as they were, and people were rejecting it. And they were claiming, no, this can't be flares. And now we're, some years later, and every investigator that was on scene, with the exception of one, now believes it was flares at the 10 p.m. event. Okay? And with the exception of one investigator. They've all changed their minds, and Montzer was the only one at the time that stood his ground, and I admire him for this, and said, no, this was not a mothership, it was flares. And I think he proved it without a shadow of a doubt. And more people backed up his reports later on, like Dr. Bruce Maccabee. Mm-hmm. There were several people that backed his work up, and I'm glad he's finally getting some recognition for it.
Now, how long after what were you in the area the night that this happened? Did you actually get to see this?
No, actually, I didn't see it. I was working at the time that night, but my director, his name was Alan Morey. He was actually on a UFO sky watch, and he was sitting on Camelback Mountain, which is right in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And he was with another sky watcher, and they actually saw the V-shaped formation fly over the city, and he said it was like nothing he'd ever seen before. And it was a triangular formation, and he saw red lights coming out, like portal lights, in a V shape, very, very slow moving, and he was amazed at what he saw. He'd never seen a formation quite like that. Now that was around between 8:30 and 9 p.m. And like you said in the beginning, there's two separate incidents here. We have the flare lights at 10, and then we have this gigantic, V-shaped craft seen by probably thousands of people, hovering very low to the ground, all over Phoenix. And so there's two different incidents here. And unfortunately, people still think the flare lights are what the people were seeing, the giant craft, and they just weren't.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's where we have to make
and the flares. Yeah, the flares are easily explained because you have evidence that the Maryland National Guard was in the area that night.
Absolutely. And you know what? The people who didn't want to accept the military's, a view of it, I can understand that. It's very frustrating. Even though I was an investigator in training at the time, I was in contact constantly with the military here to try to check up on UFO reports. That's what I'm supposed to do. I was an investigator.
Right.
And to try to get information out of the local military is like pulling teeth. Right? They just, number one, they don't care. Number two, they think it's funny. But I found an ally in the military here. Her name was, at the time, was Major Eileen Benz, and she actually assisted me, and Richard Monster at the time, on tracking down these UFO reports. And I contacted her after the Phoenix lights, and I said, look, no one believes the Maryland National Guard is here. And she said, well, I can give you the number to the company, and their name was Swift Air, and they were refueling military aircraft that were visiting at the time. And I actually contacted them, and yes, they had records that the Maryland National Guard was here that week, and they did refuel, and they were here in Phoenix. So we do know they were here for sure. But I can understand the community not believing the military. I mean, why would they tell us the truth?
Oh, right.
I understand that. I mean, but we do know they were here. We do know they were dropping flares. The flare range that's in Phoenix is one of the largest, if not the largest, in the world. We have detachments of military aircraft coming from all over the country, and in some cases all over the world, just to exercise on the range. It's huge. It's massive. Right. And there's flares being dropped, sometimes 2-3 times a week. All right. And people don't understand that. Now, what happened that night is the Maryland National Guard, they just dropped them too far up. That's what happened. And that's why people saw this. They're just too high. And, people, and it looked amazing if you look at the video, like something like you've never seen. The conditions were just right. We had a temperature inversion. So if you're looking 50, 60 miles away, you could see these lights, and they might appear amber, they might appear red, they might appear white. And if you're a long ways off, you would not actually see the parachutes from the flares. You wouldn't see them at all. You wouldn't even see the smoke. And so trying to get this information out to the public was impossible because we had people trying to sell books and sell videos. And, in fact, one of the most important witnesses contacted me was I don't know if you ever saw the Discovery Channel special on the Phoenix lights, but they had a pilot that came forth and said that it passed right over his vehicle. He and his wife were driving in Phoenix in this giant aircraft. Yeah, I'm actually the first one that interviewed him, and then I put him in contact with Richard Monster, and then we decided to protect his identity, and then he went on the show. But he was, if you remember, I don't know if you remember the show, but they didn't give you his identity, but he was a pilot, and he said he'd never seen anything like it. It was a gigantic, slow-moving aircraft, and all these reports. So we had the media trying to struggle with, okay. We had two different events, so being a MUFON investigator, we were trying to get the word to the media that, hey, these are two different events. It took years, Jim, for us to get the media to differentiate, and they still don't. They just don't.
I know.
And that's the problem with the case. That's the problem. We did have some type of gigantic aircraft, we believe, unexplained. We don't know what it was, and it was jetting around the Phoenix area between 8:30 and 10 p.m. And, there's a witness nobody knows about, and her name is Judy Varnes. She actually became the state director after the Phoenix lights, and she was walking out of a restaurant with a group of 10 to 12 people. They were friends, and it was that night, and they were walking out to the parking lot, and they saw this gigantic triangle object just kind of float slowly over the restaurant, and they had like a static electric charge in the air, and their hair started going up towards the object. And they could hear a crackling static electric charge. And they just watched it as it just, floated by. And she became so amazed by this, she got involved with MUFON, and she eventually became state director.
Now, is that the only reference to anybody feeling that way, to having that electric shock?
No, it's very rare, very rare. There was a few other reports like that, but no, generally it was not. In fact, generally it was like there was no sound at all to this gigantic aircraft moving. It was just moving very slow. The other problem we have is that there was a V-shaped formation up there, and they think it was what they call a snowbird formation, and a snowbird is a code word for planes coming from other states from the north coming up here. They call them snowbirds, okay?
That's what my parents were for years.
Yeah, I mean, they never proved it was them, but there was a V-shaped formation, and we got a hold of a couple tapes, and Richard analyzed them. And actually, I was there when he analyzed them, and he showed me that in the V-shaped formation, the lights, he did a frame-by-frame test, and the lights were moving independently of each other, all right, which means it was not one aircraft. It was ultralight aircraft of some type. So we can dismiss the V-shaped formation footage that we got, okay? We can also dismiss the flare footage because we know it dropped behind the Australia Mountains. It corresponded to the topography of the peaks of the mountains when the lights blinked out. Okay, so we've proven, we know it wasn't the flare lights. The V-shaped footage we have, we know was a bunch of different small aircraft in a V-shaped formation. So we can dismiss that. What we can't dismiss are the thousands of reports that there was an object very close to the ground moving over Phoenix in the Phoenix area. I mean,
nobody took a shot at it.
Well, this was my question to the, we used to debate this on radio, I mean, a lot, and I used to tell the people who believe that this was like some type of ET UFO event, I said, okay, this was during, the Phoenix lights occurred during Hale-Bopp comet sightings. I know you remember that. Everybody and their brother was out there with, telescopes and cameras. And we have, absolutely. So we had a lot of people out there, and this city at the time was almost between 4 and 5 million in population, Phoenix was. So my question to the people who believe that this was an alien craft, and some people claim it was up to a mile in diameter. They're so big, all right?
Right.
So I asked these people, if we have footage of the flares and if we have footage of the V-shaped formation that was explained, we know the lights were moving independently, how come there was no footage, a picture, video of the giant aircraft slowly moving over a community of almost 5 million people? And, of course, that stumped everybody. So we know a lot of those reports, we think, were confusing the V-shaped formation of light aircraft with the triangle, and we know that a lot of those people confused the flare lights with the giant aircraft. However, there are so many credible reports that there was something out there that night. We just can't dismiss it.
So actually, there were three incidents that night.
Absolutely.
There were the flares.
Absolutely.
There was the aircraft, and then the whatever it is.
Yeah, the giant aircraft. Now, even if you dismiss a lot of these reports by confusing the two, I mean, like I said, I believe Judy. She had a lot of witnesses there with her. I believe Alan Morey at the time. He was there. He saw it. He was with MUFON. I believe him. The countless other people who were non-MUFON members, a lot of their testimony is credible. So I believe there was some type of craft up there that night. But it was just so many things going on. Phoenix has got a very busy, airport. There were so many different things going on. We even had, and here's another story too, we had a detachment of police officers and firemen doing fire rescue maneuvers at Cave Creek Dam that night. And this information just doesn't get into the media. They actually witnessed the giant craft coming over the dam as they were spelunking down the dam looking at this thing.
Holy cow.
And the reason I know this is I used to work with one of these guys, and he used to train us for CPR and stuff, and he came to me, and this is years after the incident happened. He goes, I want to tell you this, but I don't want my name being used. And I said, no, go ahead. And he told me there was 30 of them out there that night that witnessed it. And these are police officers and firemen, and they actually had a helicopter pilot up there, with the maneuvers, training with him, and they told him to get in the helicopter and go up there and see what that was, and he wouldn't do it. He just flatly refused to do it. He said the lights were in a V-shaped formation, and they were warbling as they slowly moved over him, and there was no sound. They were like vibrating, like warbling. He said he's never seen anything like that. So we have that. I was involved years later. I got a call, and this is maybe 5 or 6 years after the incident. I got a call from a female. She identified herself to me, and this is new information. This has not been widely publicized, but I'll tell you now. I'm not going to give you her name, but she said she worked at Chandler Airport. Chandler is a little, area right next to Tempe in Phoenix. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
And it's out there on the east side. And basically, she said she was in a light aircraft, a twin-engine airplane, with a pilot that night coming from Tucson to Phoenix. And it was about, she said, between 9 and 9:30. And they were going from Tucson to Phoenix, and they just cleared this mountain range in this aircraft. And as they got over this mountain range, and they were scooting upwards, all of a sudden they saw this gigantic craft just sitting there in the sky. It wasn't moving; it was just sitting there.
Oh my God!
She said the pilot didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden he said, okay, we're going to have to maneuver around this thing. I don't know what that is. Because it wasn't moving. There was no lights on it. There was still a little bit of daylight left. If you know Phoenix, there's a lot of light pollution around Phoenix and Tucson. They could see the outlay of the gigantic object. She said it was huge. And as he tried to maneuver around it, she said it was just like a light switch went off and it was gone. And they both talked about it that night, and they vowed never to say anything to anybody because they didn't think anybody would believe them. She said she could show me where it was. She could pick it out on a chart. Unfortunately, the pilot had passed away, and she felt guilty. She wanted the information out. But here's the kicker. She said she worked for inside Chandler Airport, and if the information got out, she was afraid it would cost her job.
Right.
So I said, I'll keep your identity secret, but you have to come forth with the charts because anybody can make up a story like that. She said, I agreed to do it. I will do it. And then I never heard from her again. And I tried to contact her. It's funny, I had on my caller ID, though, where she was calling me from, and she was calling me from Chandler Airport. So, that was it. That's the end of the story. I do believe there's a possibility she was telling the truth. I mean, she could have made it up, but I think that's interesting because so many people saw this thing just vanish, disappear, and then it would show up, miles from where it was supposed to be. Who knows? But there was definitely, I think, something going on that night that's very mysterious.
Well, now, how did you get involved with MUFON? Or what's your interest in UFOs? How did that start?
Well, actually, I was friends with a man by the name of John Burroughs. John Burroughs is one of the principal witnesses in the Rendlesham Forest case.
Right. Yeah.
And I actually worked with him. I worked with him years ago, like in the 1980s at American Express, and we were in the same department together. And he told me about his experiences there. And it really, it interested me very much, so I got involved with the local MUFON chapter. And that's how I got involved. And I became a case study specialist, and I lectured all around Phoenix. And, we did investigations and, did the whole 9 yards. And then when the Phoenix lights hit, it basically, it was so polarizing because you had the believers in one corner, the non-believers in the other corner, and nobody in between in the gray area. You either believed in it or you didn't. It literally destroyed our group. Because Richard would present the facts, and then people would claim he was a government agent, working for the government. He wasn't. Actually, I had one of the principal witnesses accuse me of being a government agent, which is laughable, okay? And, it just literally destroyed our group eventually. I mean, we had a very successful group, and we brought in people from all over, Stanton Friedman, Kevin Randall, you name it. We had people here. Right. But then after the Phoenix lights, our group just went downhill because it polarized a lot of the people inside the group. It just really did. And I spent many years in MUFON, and after the Phoenix Lights incident, I decided to start studying other fields like the paranormal phenomena, electronic voice phenomena field. That was my other interest, and that's what I'm doing now, and I've been doing that since 2004. But we had, Phoenix is a hotbed for UFO cases, but people got to understand something. We have the Army, we have the Navy here, we have a Marine battalion in Yuma that comes down here. We have military bases all over the Phoenix area, and we're pretty sure they test things on the gunnery range, the flare gunnery range. You see strange things here all the time. And it was years later that we had a case that was just unbelievable, where a police officer and his observer on routine patrol encountered a UFO. It was in October. And it was a very clear, cool night, and they were riding around in their helicopter answering calls, and all of a sudden they encountered a green object coming straight for them, but above them. Okay, and it was coming from Priority B restricted airspace. which means it's number one, it's not supposed to be there.
Right.
Number two, the helicopter radioed it and said, "Please identify yourself." And the object that was above them and coming towards them just suddenly stopped after they radioed it. And then it started circling the helicopter from above. And then it switched directions and rotated the opposite direction above the helicopter. And they couldn't believe what they were seeing. So they radioed the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport radar tower and said, "Are you guys getting this?" And they're like, "No, we're not painting this on radar. We just have you on radar." And he says, "Well, I don't know what this thing is. It's circling us. It's going up and down. We don't know what it is. It's green colored." And all of a sudden, it shot down the freeway. It left them and went right down the freeway, and they saw it stop again. And then they said it did something, the pilot said, that he's never seen before. It shot hundreds of feet up, straight up, hundreds of feet in just a few seconds, and then stopped. And then it just continued down the freeway. He said, he said, "I've never seen anything like it. It wasn't, we were thinking maybe it was some type of laser light or hologram, but we ruled that out. There's just no way it was that. There was no clouds in the sky that night. It was clear. It just really freaked both these guys out. And somebody recorded the radio transmission and gave it to the local talk show AM radio station. It was all over the media the next morning. And I was able to call down there and get to talk to the pilot and the observer. I interviewed them. They filled out reports, and then it was in the MUFON International newsletter that comes out. And it was an amazing case. We were never able to solve it. But this area has a lot of strange things.
They actually agreed to talk to you and let it be known that it was them that saw it. I mean, that could be a career killer right there.
Yes. In fact, I'm the only one that knows their names, except the police, of course. I actually went down to the police department, talked to their information officer, and he was very helpful. He actually gave me a copy of the tape. That's a true story.
Oh.
He said, "Yes, I've got the copy of the radar. You want it? You want it?" I said, "Sure, if you guys are willing to give it to me." And I said, I promise you I will never give up their identity. And I interviewed them only by telephone. I never got to actually meet them. I interviewed the pilot separately from the observer, and their stories were almost identical. I mean, they were just like the pilot had over 30,000. I think it was 20,000 hours of flying, and he said he witnessed St. Elmo's fire. He's witnessed the Aurora Borealis. He said he's seen everything, but he's never seen anything like this. Period. He has no idea what it was. So that was one of the more interesting things. Yeah, it was
back then in, say, the middle 80s, early mid-90s, a lot of the chopper pilots for the police departments were Vietnam veterans. They flew the Hueys and stuff there and the small Bells over there in Vietnam. So if they haven't seen anything there or here before like that, then it must be definitely new to them.
Yeah, in fact,
that's
it was
amazing.
interesting. It was interesting because the story I just told you, I told on Coast to Coast many years ago. It was, I think, Whitley Strieber was subbing for Art Bell back then, and
right.
Linda Moulton Howe was in town, and she did a live, I guess, Phoenix Lights thing, and she told the story I just told you. And after that happened, I started getting emails from police officers, mainly in the Midwest, saying that they have witnessed the same thing of this green object going crazy. They have no idea what it is. I think I had 5 or 6 people email me, and I, was able to, and the poor police officers, they want to come forth with the information. They're just too frightened to. They're afraid of, what would happen to their career.
Oh, yeah.
Same with the pilots still. There's still a hush-hush mentality out there. And I understand
exactly.
that.
They'd be the last of the locker room. The police officers would. They'd take their guns away from them. So,
absolutely. If anybody really wants to really research the Phoenix Lights case in detail, I hope you'll let me plug this man. His name is Tim Printy, and if you want to Google Tim Printy Phoenix Lights, he probably has the best information available on the net about what really happened that night. And he does have some of the answers, not all the answers. The investigation, it was just a crazy thing that happened that night. Nobody knew how to investigate this case because we had so many pressures going on from each side, both the believer camps and the non-believer camps. But Tim Prinny does a very good job on his site about the V-shaped formation, the Phoenix Lights case, the people involved in the Phoenix Lights case. If anybody wants to read that, I think it's a great resource for them to actually find the truth.
I'm trying to Google it right now, but my eye doesn't work very well on my keyboard. And so
that's
just...
okay. In fact, I was just
there you go.
I've emailed him. I said, look, you did a great job, Tim. I said, thank you. I mean, and finally, instead of, I don't know how many times I've had to debate the Phoenix Lights case with I'll call them the other camp, the Village Labs, Jim Delatoso, that group. But even Jim Delatoso now, which is 2 or 3 years ago, came out and admitted that, yes, it was probably flares that night. Even he admits it now, okay? And so, I'm glad everybody's coming around. I just wish we had some sort of credible, hard evidence of that giant craft. I mean, there was something going on that night that was not the V-shaped formation, that was not the flare lights, yet it escaped. It escaped all the cameras, all the video cameras. It just escaped. So there was too many things going on that night, and I think that's basically a nutshell. Now, people are getting. Unfortunately, people used to send us, being a part of MUFON, they used to send us pictures of flares, and they didn't know what they were. I think I've seen hundreds of photographs of flares. Okay, so when people say that they've encountered something unusual, I can tell if it's a flare usually in about 3 seconds. Okay, because I've seen hundreds of photos of these things. All right, and there's so much disinformation out there. People have to understand that most of the sightings of these red orb-like objects are in direct line with the flare gunnery range. Always. Okay, there's a famous person out there, a medical doctor, who wrote a book about the Phoenix Lights, and all of her sightings are in direct line of the gunnery range of the red orb, that she reports.
Right.
So it's just very frustrating, and I'm really happy that slowly people are evolving. At least they're not going to, into the camp that maybe a lot of this was explainable, but yet there probably was something going on that night.
Right. Yeah, because with that doctor, that's the direction her balcony, her and her husband's house looks over.
Absolutely. It's so frustrating. I mean, there's a New Times article written by a reporter by the name of Tony Ortega, and you can get it still online. And he was part of the Phoenix New Times detachment. Now he's in Los Angeles. Okay, and he wrote a couple of articles about the Phoenix Lights that people should read. And you can just Google his name, Tony Ortega, Phoenix Lights, and you'll find a couple articles. I hope they're still online. They should be. And I was in contact with him. He was asking me questions. He was asking Richard questions. He was a very credible source, and he kind of got to the bottom of the disinformation, I should say, that was going on out there. But just remember something: when you contact a military base for UFO information, they're not going to help you. They're really not.
No.
I was able to find Major Benz, and she was interested in the subject. She wanted to help us. She wanted to get the truth out. If it wasn't for Major Benz, we wouldn't have received the information from the Phoenix Lights that we had. We just wouldn't have, because people just don't want to bother. It was so interesting. People were saying, well, how come nobody notified us that the Maryland National Guard was there until a few months later? And you know why they didn't? Is because no one called the right area on base to check. That's what happened. When people are visiting from other military bases into Luke, which is the Air Force Base in Phoenix, you have to call the TDY, the Visiting Aircraft Section. They will give you the information. If you call another section on base, they won't help you. They could care less about it. So you got to be very careful when you deal with the military. And I'll give you another interesting thing you might find interesting, too. When we used to hold our meetings, our MUFON meetings, on the Air National Guard base, believe it or not, okay? Yeah. They had a huge auditorium that fit 280 people. And after the Phoenix Lights incident hit, they had to kick us out of there because we were getting 250, 300 people a month into our meetings, all right? And people were calling the guard base every day saying, "Is this MUFON?" which is funny. And I'll be the first to tell you this little gem of information, and it's never been told publicly, but why not? It's been, 12 years later. We were called in to, and I'll just say a leading official of the air base. I won't tell you who his name was because I don't want to get him in trouble. And my state director at the time and myself were called in there, and they gave us an envelope and said, we received this. We don't want anything to do with this, but we want to give it to you. And it was inside. It was a letter and a map, and on the map were a map of UFO crashes in Nevada and Arizona. Okay,
really?
We didn't know who was front. Yeah, and they didn't want to just throw it away. They gave it to us, but they didn't want to be identified. They didn't want us to tell anybody that they gave it to us. So we actually investigated, and we found, I should say, my director found the person, and it turned out to be a person that was not mentally with it, so to speak, and they had just drawn a map with UFO crashes where they thought it happened. They had no knowledge, of it really happening. But it's funny when you hear about how the military doesn't want to help, but sometimes they do. And in that case, it actually happened, but at the time we could tell nobody about it. And that's a true story.
Wow.
I'll never forget that. Yeah.
Well, now, after this happened, it's too bad that wasn't a real map, man.
Thank goodness.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
Actually, I was hoping it would be, but
yeah, some nice road trips.
Yes.
With a metal detector and Geiger counter, yeah, that'd be great.
Yes.
Now after all this happened, the governor at the time, Governor Fife Symington, put on a little show when this became public of bringing out. They said that we have caught the person responsible and everything, and brought out one of his aides in a Martian uniform or a costume. And I remember the hellstorm that started. The people that are credible witnesses that have put their jobs on the line, everything, that have went out there and said this is what I saw. I mean, they were very, very upset that he took such a lackadaisical approach at this, and he ended up apologizing. But man, I mean, that was just it was a case of not knowing what to do, I believe.
Well, I'll tell you what happened. There was a legislature by the name of Barwood, last name of Barwood. I don't know if you've ever read of her, but she was putting pressure. Yes, and she's no longer in government, but she was a council person at the time, and she was putting pressure on the local government to investigate it because she kept getting calls from people, from her area, saying that we want to know what happened. So I think Fife Symington thought it would be pretty funny to stage this, little thing where the rubber, man in an alien suit came up on stage in a press conference and make fun of it. And then all of a sudden, sometime later, he admits that he actually saw the giant craft hovering over Phoenix. Yeah. He actually witnessed it. Now, why did he do that? I mean, why would you do something like that? And people, I guess the believer camp, and I'm going to call them that because I don't know what else to call them, because I'm kind of in between the believer and the non-believer camp on the Phoenix Lights. Okay, I know there was something up there that night, but we have no credible evidence. The problem with what he did is, he was a convicted felon. He went to prison. Okay, and people are lauding his testimony as, he saw the Phoenix Lights, so it gives the case instant credibility. Well, if you've been into prison for lying, and I believe he was convicted of some type of fraud, why would you make him as a credible witness, and why would you tout him in your corner? Now, it doesn't mean that people convicted of fraud can't see UFOs. I understand that. But why would you give the case instant credibility based on his testimony? I wouldn't, and I tell that to everybody. It's just another person who, maybe he really did see it. I don't know. But to tout him as their best witnesses is just plain wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, he gave some statements about about what he saw, because he's like you said, he said he saw it. And one of the statements he made is, and I'm quoting, "I am a pilot and I know about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything that I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery. Other people saw it, responsible people. I don't know why people would ridicule it. But then again, he did.
Yeah, it shows kind of a defect, doesn't it? It shows you that he probably didn't want to risk his career at the time, so he made fun of it.
Yeah.
I mean, this became a very political hot potato. It really did. I mean, people wanted answers, and they thought the government could tell them answers. And when they knew they weren't going to get it out of Luke Air Force Base, they sought to hold their government accountable. And you know what? What do you do when you see something in the sky and you know what? You have no evidence of it? What are you supposed to do? I mean, seriously. I mean, you have witness testimony, and that's it. That's all you have in this case. And I'm not saying that it's nothing, because there were so many people that witnessed it. I really do believe in my heart, and I'm just saying this from an emotional point, that yes, there was something up there that night. However, if you take the 30% or 40% of people who saw the flare lights, you dismiss that. If you take the other 30 or 40% of people who saw the V-shaped formation that we know were ultralight craft, then you can dismiss that. So now you're up to 70 or 80%. That still doesn't explain the 20% of hardcore people who saw a physical craft that night. I mean, there's just too many reports. I just can't believe that all those people would be lying. I just don't believe that.
No, I mean they can't. And how would they come up with all the same story? Because it's almost all of them are identical. I mean, you have airline pilots. You have. I read of a report where there was a deputy U.S. Marshal that gave that was a witness. And also, now I don't know, you probably know the answer to this. I also read of I believe it was F-16s being scrambled from Luke to go after it.
Yes.
And when the F-16s returned, that one of the pilots was so shook up, was so distraught over this, that he had to be helped from the cockpit of his jet.
And that's another interesting story that's never been confirmed. We just can't confirm it. It's also just like the story of our famous believer, Jim Delatoso story, where he said he received gun camera footage of the Phoenix Lights from a pilot that night, and the pilot handed him the videotape of it, from the cockpit. The actual tape that was from the cockpit. Well, we know that was just bogus because, they don't use videotape and gun camera footage in a jet aircraft. It doesn't. It's encrypted. It doesn't work that way. But he fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Now, I don't. Like I said, it's just another unconfirmed story. I mean, it'd be nice if the pilots came out and actually admitted and identified themselves, but you'll never see that if it really happened. Yeah. So it just remains another
there goes their
unconfirmed.
retirement. Yeah, there goes everything. That's why you can imagine what the astronauts have seen. Being up there for months and months in in Skylab or whatever's up there now, the Soviet one. They've seen things they can't explain, and sometimes they sneak out. The story sneaks out, but if they ever came right out and said, "Yeah, we saw some crazy shit, we saw some crazy stuff up there," that's there goes their retirement, there goes their everything.
Absolutely, and Stephen Greer, I've met Stephen Greer a couple times, and if I know a lot of people are down on him, and I understand why, but actually he did something really good, with his UFO disclosure project, where he had all these military witnesses come forth. People that were high up in the chain and actually tell their stories of what they witnessed, and what they were a part of. That is something that's fantastic. I mean, if people want to just poo-poo the whole UFO mystery, it's just a shame, because if you do research on the subject, there's a number of credible cases that are so totally unexplainable. You just can't poo-poo the UFO, the UFO field like most people do. Now, when you start researching these cases, and you go back to a lot of the cases in the 1970s, the 1970s were thought of and called the decade of contact. That's probably some of the best cases we've ever had was from the 1970s. And some of those cases are so unexplainable. We have radar data from the, Washington Capitol sightings in the 1950s. Objects were going like 3,000 miles an hour, making right turns, which is impossible. You have the coin sighting of a military helicopter pilot we had radar data and ground observations. You have the Edwards UFO case. You have so many the Bentwaters, Lake and Heath case, and then you have Rendlesham, of course. Rendlesham's like the granddaddy, and then you have Roswell, of course. Roswell, everybody knows about Roswell. So you can't sit there and say nothing's going on. And in fact, when people say, "Well, how do you know something's going on?" and I said, "Well, have you ever heard of the Freedom of Information Act?" and they're like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, after it was passed, Stanton Friedman had reams and reams of information requests that were given to him by the government, and they were all blacked out, all of them. Cases that were in the 1940s, cases in the 1950s that would have no security. I mean, there was no way they should keep that covered up. A UFO case in the 1940s, there's no reason. So why are they all blacked out? Why is that information blacked out? And that, to me, is my proof that the UFO field, there's definitely something buzzing around our skies. Whether we want to just hide our head in the sand or not, we need to really closely look at that.
Yeah, because the old cases, like you're talking about, the ones in the 40s, majority of those people have passed away. So It's not protecting. It's not. What's it protecting? I guess maybe their family, but I mean, it just doesn't make any sense unless they were all marked out before they passed away. But then the original's got to be somewhere. You're talking about UFO cases. Next month, May 1st, I'm going up to a symposium that's being put on by Paula Harris up in Chicago, and it's about the UFO sighting up at O'Hare Airport that pilots and ground crew and everything saw over one of the terminals, and then just shot straight up into the sky and punched a hole in the clouds, where people said that they actually saw the blue sky on the other side of, just punched this hole out of the clouds, and there was the blue sky. Mm-hmm. We're going up to a symposium up there on that. And this is the first one I've been to, and I'm really excited about that.
She's been involved in the community for a very long time. I've never actually seen her speak. We were trying to get her before on our chapter, but there's another case, the famous Travis Walton case. Okay, now I've always poo-pooed abduction cases. Okay, but what happened in this case? About 10 years ago, they reopened the case. A few researchers, and they contacted me, and I'm like, "Well, what do you want me to do about this?" And they said, "Well, we have tree ring evidence that we think is pretty special. All right, but we need more information, and we know you got a reputation for getting people pissed off and talking to you." So I was like, "Okay." So what do you want me to do? Well, see if you can talk to some of the principal witnesses, get any files that are lying around. So I actually went to the area where Travis Walton, claimed he was abducted back in the 70s. And Travis Walton was a logger that claimed he was abducted by a UFO, and there was multiple witnesses there, loggers. They were out logging one day, and they came across this UFO hovering in a field, and Travis got out of the truck, walked towards the UFO, and a beam of light came and hit him. And the other people in the truck, there were his friends, the logging friends or workers, they took off. They were scared to death. They came back to the scene. He was gone. Okay, and a few days later, he resurfaced in a town close by, and he said he had all these abduction experiences. Well, okay, so I went back up to that location, and I talked to a number of the police officers that were there, and I stayed there, I think it was 3 or 4 days, I can't remember exactly, and I found out the original file on the case was destroyed because their records warehouse had burned down a few years ago, so I couldn't get the original copies of that. I talked to the police chief, Marvin Gillespie, and he told me that he believes that something really did happen that night. He's not saying that he believes that Travis was abducted, but he believes something unusual happened. And then I found another deputy that was there that night. And they told me he was dead, but I found him in a city in Payson, Arizona. He was 94 or 93 years old, and he told me it was a hoax, that there was some guy standing on a log with an arc welder's torch, and that was their UFO. And I said, "Well, don't you think that all those witnesses would have noticed a guy standing on a log with an arc welder's torch?" And
that just doesn't make any sense anyway.
Yeah, it was crazy. And but here was something interesting. I talked to the person who did the polygraphs on Travis. Okay, and he still has you can go online and get his name. I don't want to. I don't know if he's still practicing. This was a number of years ago, and he was in his 60s then, so he might be retired. But he was the second person to give Travis Walton the polygraph test. Okay, the first polygraph test they gave Travis Walton was a DPS, Department of Public Safety polygrapher, and he was notably the best supposedly in the state. But what happened is, the technology back in the 1970s when it comes to polygraph tests wasn't very accurate. Just, and there's some question today if they're accurate, all right? And that's why they're not used in court. So basically, he gave Travis this polygraph test, and he flunked them, okay? Now, what he did, though, when looking at the files, because they're very interesting, he asked Travis a question during the baseline part of the test. Now, back then, in a polygraph test, they give you a set of baseline questions so they can measure how your body reacts. And then they give you the questions for the test. So they give you the baseline questions first, and they want to see how your body reacts, and then they give you the real questions. In one of the baseline questions, he asked Travis about a problem in his past where he and his brother had been arrested for forging some checks. Okay? Travis got very upset when he asked him about it because he said, what does this have to do with it? Why are you asking me that question? Right. So he flunked the test. Well, the person who gave the second test passed him. And I asked the second polygrapher, the guy who gave the second test, do you believe that this person purposely flunked Travis by asking him that question in the baseline? And you know what he said to me? He said, I can't comment on that. I said, okay. Let me rephrase the question. If you were doing the polygraph test on Travis Walton, would you have asked him that question? He said, no, I wouldn't have. Could it have possibly really messed up the results of the polygraph test? He said, yes. So I really believe, even though we can't prove that they purposely set out to flunk Travis on that polygraph test. I really believe that. Okay? Yeah. But I can't prove it. Okay? So that I thought was interesting because I thought there wasn't much to that case. And then I was approached about 6 months later by a witness who actually, if you remember anything about the Travis Walton story, he said he was brought into a building and there was a silver saucer object in the building, and he looked at it. It was a crazy story. Well, there was a person the day after Travis Walton was claiming he was abducted. There was a family traveling on a vehicle close to where he was abducted, up in northern Arizona, and they actually saw two silver saucers flying in the sky, and they pulled their car over, to get a look at it, and they just and Travis reported there was two saucers in a building that he saw, silver saucers. All right. Well, this person, the witness came forth and talked to me about it, and he said, look, I'm not in good health. I reported it to the police, never heard another word about it. There was 4 witnesses. My son saw it. My wife saw it. My mother saw it. We were all in the car together. And I thought maybe it might be something important for the police. So he reported it to the police. They have no record of him reporting it. None. There's no record. Now, maybe it got lost. I don't know. Back then, who knows. But he actually contacted Travis, and he said, look, I believe you because I think I might have saw what you reported you saw. The 2 saucers, the silver saucers in that building. I saw them a day after you were abducted. And Travis, wrote him back and said, look, he says, you don't want your life ruined like mine was. So don't tell anybody. Yeah. Now, that tells me, and I actually confronted Travis with this. I said, why didn't you put this in your book? It would have given more credibility to use this person's name. He would have let you. And he told me the same thing. I didn't want his life to be ruined like mine was. So that tells me, there's a number of things you can look at angles. But I gained a lot of respect for Travis then. Yeah. He could have done that. So did it really happen? Maybe something really happened that night up there. Who knows? But then it's just another interesting, piece of the puzzle of UFO and abduction and those type of cases.
Exactly. Well, this will be a good spot right now to just take a break for about 10 minutes. Okay. And when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about the UFOs, and then go into the paranormal with you, if you don't mind.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, we're going to, like I say, take off for about 10 minutes, play a little music. Everybody gets to refresh their beverage of their choice, or pop some more popcorn, or whatever you're doing, sitting around the fireplace. So, like I say, we'll be back in about 10, 11 minutes.
Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angels. Lonely as I am,
Are you an experienced ghost hunter or just ghost curious? In either case, on your next trip to beautiful Branson, Missouri, make sure you visit Ghosts of Branson. Hi, I'm Dr. Chuck Kennedy, owner of Ghosts of Branson, with over 40 years of experience as a paranormal investigator and an author of over a dozen books. I have personally scouted the best location in the Ozarks. Branson is the vacation capital of America. It is less than a one-day drive to one-third of the U.S. population, and at Ghosts of Branson, we have the ghost tour or investigation that is right for you. On all of our tours, each location is investigated and documented. You won't just hear stories and folklore. Using the night show technology, you will see the photographs and video and hear the EVPs that confirm each location is haunted. Are you a member of a group? Well, then check out our Ghost Hunters Getaway, a weekend to die for. 3 great days of ghost hunting events that you will never forget. So don't wait. Check out ghostsofbranson.com and book your tour or weekend now. Remember, don't let your vacation be normal. Make it paranormal with Ghosts of Branson.
Okay, Chuck. Next time I'm down that way, I will do that. That was my friend Dr. Chuck Kennedy. He owns Ghosts of Branson. A very dear friend of mine. He used to run some ghost tours up in the Chicago area, some Chicago suburbs. Love him like a brother. Great person. And can't wait to talk to him and see him again. Okay, welcome back to Paranormal Geeks Radio. I'm your host, Jim here. We are talking tonight with Mr. Jim Kelly. He was with MUFON down in the Phoenix, Arizona area during the time of the Phoenix Lights. And we've been talking about that for the last hour, that and other UFO cases. Jim, I do have one question for you.
Sure.
And then we're going to move on to some other topics. What do you think is we've kind of touched on this a little bit in the show the last hour, but what do you think is the most believable sighting that's been documented?
Oh, I think there's a number of them. Okay, but in a sighting, a UFO sighting case, your dream case would be technical data that supports the case, like say radar data. Okay, now
right.
Since radar systems aren't infallible, I mean they do make mistakes, sometimes. But when you have radar data of an object going 2,000-3,000 miles an hour in the 1950s and then stopping and then, making right turns and doing all sorts of things, now that's great. But if you have people on the ground witnessing the same time as it's being, that it's on radar, that's the kind of cases you want to focus on. Those are the kind of cases. The Rendlesham Forest case has got to be one of the best cases ever because you have so much documentation. You have so many credible witnesses. But a lot of the radar cases, the Washington National case to me is beyond reproach. That's one of my top 5 cases. But anytime you get a case like those where you have multiple tiers of evidence, combining into one modicum, and then once you can get as much evidence as you can, those are the cases you need to center on. And I think that both the radar cases with ground witnesses, those have got to be the best type of cases, I think.
Yeah, because with Rendlesham, did they? I mean, that was another one that everybody's tried to debunk, so to speak, saying that the light they saw was the lighthouse. But you have witnesses. You have these Air Force officers and enlisted men that I have a phone call coming in, and I cannot take this phone call right now, but I believe they are listening to the show. But you have all this evidence. You have enlisted men, you have officers that actually see this, and you have enlisted men that go up and actually touch it. And there's, even with Rendlesham, there's a report of maybe of an abduction of one of the Air Force enlisted men. I believe, wasn't it Burroughs that they say?
Burroughs. I think it was Peniston, but Burroughs. It's really interesting. This is just such a strange world. I worked with John Burroughs in the 1980s, and then I lost contact with him. Mm-hmm. Okay, then I started working at another company, and he was there. So I hooked up with him in the early 2000, right around that period of time. And he, like I said, he explained to me in detail what was going on in Rendlesham, stuff that had never been released. Okay, and I told him I would never tell anybody, and I didn't until he finally released it publicly on the History Channel. I think the last special he did.
Right.
It had this incident had a profound effect on his life, and it still has to this day. Okay, his health issues are, and I don't know if it has anything to do with that. He thinks it does. He's told me in detail what he experienced. But what was really bothering him is what he never told until recently, and that was the C-130 that right after the Rendlesham occurrences happened, a C-130 flew into the base. He was assuming they were soldiers, got off the plane in funny little white suits, and they went into one of the quote-unquote Priority A bunkers. And if you know what Priority A means, you know what I'm talking about, okay? These were bunkers where nuclear weapons were stored, all right? Now, one of the nights that Burroughs was there, when he was there, there was a report, and he told me this, that one of the lights they saw in the sky, a beam of light came down from the object, and it actually touched one of the nuclear bunkers. Okay?
Right.
And they didn't know what it was doing. Then it took off. Well, all of a sudden, here comes a C-130 pulling in, and all these people in little white, suits get off, and they go into the bunker, and they carried things out of the bunker. Okay? Now, he struggled with this information for years. All right? He finally released that information on his last discovery, I think it was a History Channel, of what happened. And it had bothered him, because what could have done that? And he couldn't tell anybody this. He told me, because he knew I was involved with MUFON. He knew I wouldn't say anything, until he released it.
Right.
But, that's the Rendlesham case stands alone. I think it's a better case than Roswell, because you have multiple tiers of reports. Now, the debunkers that try to poo-poo Rendlesham by saying it was a lighthouse light, I mean, come on. I mean, they're just fetching. They're trying anything they can do to debunk it. They're trying anything they can do to just explain it away. Well, you can't have all these people that were experiencing these things and tell them they weren't. All right, these were trained observers. These weren't just some people off the street, so to speak. Okay, so I think it's an incredible case. Something very unusual happened that night. But the problem with the case now is people like John, and I hate to ding him on this, but all this information they had, allegedly about the abduction now, it's coming out years later. Okay, yes. This stuff should have come out earlier. All right, especially the abduction scenario. Okay,
right.
The Larry Warren book. I don't know if you've ever read that. Where Larry Warren claimed he was there. Well, no one remembers seeing him there the nights this happened. Nobody, even John. So I never saw him. He wrote a book about it called Left at East Gate. I actually sat down with him and said, look, no one saw you there. How do you explain that? And he says, I don't know. So there's problems with the case. Just like Roswell, I mean, if you claim you're there and nobody remembers seeing you there, that's an issue. Okay, that's an issue. All right? There's one of the nights in question, nobody saw him and all this stuff happened. But this happens, and I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of paranormal stuff since you have a show on it. Most paranormal stories, there's always something wrong with the story. There's always an avenue that doesn't seem right, whether it's ghost phenomena, whether it's UFO phenomena. People like to latch on to a story and then claim things, later on that aren't factual.
Right.
It's very common. Look at the Amityville case, story. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the new documentary called My Amityville Horror, where the adopted son, he's in his 50s now, they made a movie of his experiences there. It's excellent documentary. It's on Netflix if anybody wants to watch it.
Was that Christopher?
Yes.
Yeah,
and,
I met him. I met him in Chicago last year.
There you go. So we know that there was fraud in the Amityville Horror, correct? We know there was fraud in there, perpetrated. We have documented. But we also have a lot of people that experienced a lot of things there. So was there something going on, but then it was elaborated to make it into something bigger than it was? Well, that's how a lot of UFO cases, that's what happens. In the perfect case is the Phoenix Lights case. We have all these people reporting stuff years later. Oh, guess what? I was there that night. I was abducted in Phoenix. Well, is it credible? How do you know? You just don't know. And that's the problem with witness testimony right there. I remember one of the first UFO cases I did as an investigator was just a common sighting at a pool site here in Phoenix, actually in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix. And I interviewed two ladies. They were within 5 years age-wise of each other. They both wore glasses, but they had good eyesight. And they were at the pool, and they looked up and they saw a UFO hovering over the apartment complex, but it was kind of high up in the sky. Well, one lady was terrified. The other lady was very calm, okay? And they were both looking at the same object, and one lady saw a saucer and the other one saw a cigar. So there's your reliability on some witnesses. Some witnesses are just not reliable. So you have to take each case, you have to take each case and try to identify the parts that don't make sense versus the parts that do make sense, and try to back it up with credible information.
Exactly. Well, the gentleman's name is Christopher Quartino.
Yes.
And he actually lives in Phoenix.
Yes. In fact, he actually, if you haven't seen it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. I've followed the Amityville Horror case for many years. Probably research it like a lot of people do. And once the media hears the word fraud, they run with it. Or hoax, they run with it. They usually don't investigate it. They just interview the person who's claiming that it's a hoax, okay? And then it gets all discombobulated, right?
Yeah.
And but his version was fascinating. He claims that it was actually George Lutz that was into black magic, and he did all these satanic rituals in the house, and he invoked what was ever in there, and he had psychokinetic powers that could move objects. It's hard, and then you have the other side in the movie where the skeptical side, the psychologists and psychiatrists say, well, maybe he was just imprinting these things from the movies he saw when he was younger, So you get both sides of it. But I really to this day, and I defend it. I don't think the Amityville Horror was a total hoax. I think something was going on in the house, but I think parts of it was hoaxed. That's how I feel about a lot of paranormal cases. The famous Edinburgh Voices in New England, of the little girls who, yeah, there you go. They claim they admitted later on that they were hoaxing some of it, but not all of it, because the investigators saw objects move that couldn't have moved. Probably the most famous case, if you want to go paranormal phenomena, was the Connecticut poltergeist case in the 1970s, and it was huge.
The one in the funeral home. They lived in a funeral home.
Bridgeport, Connecticut, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Paul Eno was involved in it. The Ed and Lorraine Warren was involved in it. The national media went crazy with it, and it's one of the few cases we have where police officers actually witnessed phenomena and put it on their report. Okay? And later they came out and said it was the girl hoaxing everything, the little girl who claimed she was talking to a spirit through a cat. Okay? And Paul Eno was there. He talked to the girl. She never said anything to him about that. He actually was hit by a television set as he was walking around in there. He was a young investigator at the time. And it's detailed. That story is detailed in one of his books. But, you have cases where you have a 500, the same case, the Bridgeport case, where a 500-pound refrigerator just picks itself up and rotates and then sets itself back down on the floor, which is, impossible. Okay? I don't know how a 13-year-old girl can do that. But see, here's another case where it has great evidence, but there's a fraudulent aspect to it, and especially when it involves children. You have to be careful when you have children involved in a paranormal case to take what they say literally. And it's just another problem we have. Exactly. But you don't throw the whole case out. You have to identify those, the facts from the fantasy, if you can.
Yeah, because there's and it's so easy nowadays to fake photographs. It's so easy to fake EVPs. It's anymore. It's you don't know what to believe.
Well, here's the thing about EVPs. Okay, I started studying after I got through with MUFON. I wanted to pursue the investigation of spirit phenomena. I've always been interested in it. Like many people, I had a lot of things happen when I was stationed in England in the Air Force in the late 1970s, and so I wanted to pursue it, but I couldn't find a good skeptical group in Phoenix. Because skepticism to me is number one. You have to be skeptical. You have to be. If you're not skeptical, you're not a very good investigator. That's how I always felt about it. But I finally found a group that was skeptical, and we had like a mixture of believers and skeptical people. But I wanted to study the EVP, electronic voice phenomena, sounded absolutely ridiculous to me, okay? And then after I tromped around like every other investigator does with one recorder for about a year and not picking up anything, I finally said, okay, first of all, we need to find a active location, and then we need to test some EVP theories out. And sure enough, from 2004 to about 2007, we had a rash of just wild, cases in our paranormal group here in Phoenix. And I was able to get my own, procedure going about how I capture EVP. And I know why people are skeptical on EVP, because everybody's doing it differently. They're using spirit boxes and something called the ovulus and the paranormal pug, all these ridiculous contraptions that are just fraudulent tools, okay? Yes. There is a bona fide mystery of picking up a voice, an interactive voice, on a recording device that interacts with you. And we actually had a house here in Phoenix that was incredible. We studied it for 5 years, and I think I pulled something like 30 different voices of men, women, children, and even the owner's dead cat came to meow at us one time, and it was incredible. We captured it all on audio. We tried. This house became like our paranormal laboratory. Like I said, we did 5 investigations, and we tested different theories out, and I learned a lot about EVP just through that case, But I see these investigators running around with one recorder, and it's like sticking a needle in a haystack, and it frustrates me because I know why the parapsychologists mostly dismiss EVP, because they're kind of afraid of how the people are capturing it out there. I know that for a fact.
Right.
Most parapsychologists won't even touch it. They don't like the subject. They don't want to deal with it. But I believe, in my own opinion here, is EVP is the best evidence we have of the spirit world, if it's done correctly and if you capture it correctly. Okay? And okay. I really believe that. So I've captured samples that are just incredible. And they made my head turn. Just interactive things. One night we were in this haunted house, and there was my director and I were spending all the whole night there by ourselves, and we were conducting audio and video experiments. Okay, the owners were in California, and they gave us the keys and said, "Go have fun." Okay, so we were in the house the whole night, and it was the most active time. It was the most active investigation. Now, my director, he's more hardcore skeptic than I am. All right, but the evidence we obtained that night was just unbelievable. We captured everything except an apparition. Okay, but this thing in the house, whatever it is, was interacting with us via the recorders, and it was just incredible. The evidence we pulled. The meter interaction, which I don't believe in. EMF meter interaction, which you see a lot of on television. Right. It only happened to me once, and it was inside this house in the 10+ years I've been an investigator. It only happened once, and I thought it was so funny when it started happening. I told my director, I said, "Look at the meters; they're all going nuts." I said, "We have like 4 different kind of EMF meters in there. We have a tri-field cell sensor, and the only one that wasn't moving was a tri-field." And basically it started beeping, and I said, "Okay, if you're a spirit or a ghost or whatever you are," I said, "I'm going to ask you some questions. Beep 3 times for yes and twice for no." And guess what it started doing the entire night? It was doing it. We captured it. Yeah, it was crazy. And we were asking questions like yes and no questions. And then we were getting voices on the recorders. We're not one of those teams that just stop and check your evidence while we're doing the investigation. We check the evidence afterwards. But it was incredible the voice activity we received in there. In fact, out of the 5 cases, the 5 investigations we did there, we never once did not come out with any type of evidence, of audio evidence. It was just insane in there. And this is interactive stuff. And so then I realized, okay, there's something to this EVP thing. And then I think we went to Waverly Hills. We flew into Waverly Hills. We investigated that location, and we recorded some really good EVP-type evidence there, too. And then we went to the Birdcage Theater, and I probably captured the best recording I've ever captured was in the basement of the Birdcage Theater. And I had 2 recorders down there, and I think we had 23 recorders in the place, like one every 5-6 feet. And we had, I asked a question about soiled doves, and we were on the main floor. And if you know anything about the Birdcage Theater, that's where Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp hung out in Tombstone, Arizona, and it's the oldest building there. And basically, I asked a question. We're doing a controlled EVP session. We're all on the main floor, 5 of us. And I was monitoring the session with a shotgun microphone, which is more powerful than a parabolic mic. And I didn't hear anything in the entire EVP session. Well, I asked a question about how many soiled doves live there. And soiled doves refer to prostitutes back in the 1800s. That's what the term means.
Right.
And on one of the recorders in the basement, you hear 2 voices talking over each other saying, no, they don't live here. And then a second later, you hear another voice say, none, really loud. So I thought it was somebody committing fraud. And I checked the other recording devices on there, and it wasn't on the other recording device. It was on the one recorder. So I know nobody had hoaxed it. So when you get evidence like that, you have to think. Now, if anybody wants to listen to that, they can go to YouTube. And if you go to Paranormal Journeys Tombstone, you can hear that EVP, Paranormal Journeys Tombstone. And Jeff Belanger asked me permission to use it on his documentary on there, and I gave him permission to use it. And you can hear it, and it's just amazing. And after I got that EVP, I said, okay, I'm not a skeptic anymore. There's something to this, all right? However, with saying that, I've seen up close how groups, especially, and I'm not saying all groups, I'm just saying the groups here in Phoenix or in the Arizona, I see how they're capturing EVP. And they're running around with one recorder, okay? And they're hearing noises on their recorder, and they think it's a ghost, or they think it's something paranormal. And in the words of Lloyd Auerbach, famous parapsychologist, who does accept EVP, he says if you do not use multiple recording devices, your EVP evidence means nothing. Nothing. And I believe that, and we actually, through our own work here in our group, is we would ask a question, say, if we were in a haunted location, we would ask a question in the living room, we would get a response in one of the back bedrooms on a recording device.
Yeah.
So you have to use multiple devices, and I see investigators using one recorder, and just not going to work. You can't do it that way.
Well, EVP, I think go on.
I think EVP is the best evidence we have of an afterlife, but it's the most abused type of evidence in the paranormal field. It's really sad to see what's happening, And I understand why people are skeptical of it. I mean, I really do. It's very disheartening. I was recently told that, by another group recently, and I won't say who, that you should do multiple EVP sessions in a building, okay? And then what you do is you go and download your audio, and if you see different audio bumps on your line graphs in your software, that's the EVP. And I just didn't say anything. I was like, what in God's name are you talking about? I mean, you just can't do it that way, So I understand why people are skeptical about it.
Well, what would you say is the best? How do you do EVPs? What equipment do you use? How do you go about that?
Well, I wish I could give you some kernel of great information here. The best thing to do is just to say you're in a typical. I'm going to say typical house. Say it's just a ranch style house, no upstairs. All right. You have 3 bedrooms. Right. Okay. And what you want to do is you want to place as many recording devices in that home as you can, and you want to situate them at least 2 a room, at least 2 in each room, because one acts as a control device. Because I don't know how many times where I thought I might have gotten an EVP, and I'll check the control recorder, and that voice or noise is on the other recorder. So we have to dismiss it. Now, why is that important? Right. Why would you dismiss it? Well, because the fact is that most true EVPs will only be on one recording device. Okay, just one. You could have a room full of 10 recorders. It'll be on one recording device. All right, number one. And that backs up the work of David Roundtree. I don't know if you know who David Roundtree is, but I think he's a pioneer.
Definitely.
He's a pioneer in the study of EVP. In fact, the evidence I have captured in the field the last 10 years supports his theories that EVP is not really sound at all in the conventional sense, that it's communication imprinted on the devices by an unknown process. And that's why we don't hear EVPs. That's why we don't hear them when they're on the recorder. We can't hear them because they're imprinted by a process we have no idea what's doing it. So the best thing you can do is use multiple recorders, use omnidirectional microphones. Try to use microphones that don't use batteries or they have like condenser mics. That's what you should do. And you have to control the environment too. I mean, running around like they do on television, like Ghost Hunters and all these other shows, Ghost Adventure. Sit down, be quiet, don't walk around. What are you walking? Walk into a wall while you're doing an EVP session? Just sit down and be quiet because you're controlling the environment. So if you get a voice, you're not walking around making that wood floor creak that sounds like a voice on audio, right? So you don't see that on television because it's not exciting enough. And then the other thing you have to do is research EVP. Go back and research how EVP got started. Read the literature by D. Scott Rogo, he was a pioneer in EVP. Him and Raymond Bayless. Read his stuff, what he did in the 1970s. Read about what EVP is, and stay away from. And my golden rule is stay away from any device that talks. It's junk. It's garbage. It's not been tested. It's absolute crap. Okay, and people are making money off the Oculus, the spirit boxes. You ask an investigator who believes in the spirit box how it works, and they give you that look like, huh? They have no idea how it works. They don't know what it's doing. You're listening to radio waves. You're listening to CB radio waves, all sorts of stuff. And basically, if you could control your environment, sit down, relax, do a controlled EVP session, use as many recorders as possible. And the other thing is you have to trust your team, the people on your team, because you have to rely on them too. But EVP is real. It's just very difficult to capture a good one. Okay, and then you have to decipher what the good evidence from the bad evidence is. But I think EVP is the key in proving the existence of ghosts. I believe that, profoundly. And the evidence I've captured supports David Roundtree's work. I don't want to do a shameless plug, but I will get his book, Paranormal Technology. He goes in depth about his experiments in EVP. He's an audio engineer. He actually ties in EMF with EVP, okay, because he's captured EVPs, and he has equipment that'll put us all to shame, stuff worth $100,000. Or every time when he captures EVP, he gets EMF bumps on the spectrum, okay. So it's a great book to read and study if you're looking at the EVP aspect, But you have to know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, if you want to walk around with one recorder, good luck with that.
I have to agree with you 100% about the Ovilus, about the Hack Shack, about the was that PS2 or whatever the thing is, the FM radio.
PS7. Yeah.
Hey, that's it. That's how much I know about it. I hope this group isn't listening, but I was with a group up in a museum, which one of the rooms just happened to be a bunch of Abraham Lincoln memorabilia, some life masks, some bronze fists that they made casts of his fists holding a broken broom handle and stuff. But we were doing an EVP session in there using the Hack Shack, and it's going through the and it was ridiculous. So we're in this room, and it makes my ears blow. I am now leaving. When someone breaks one of those out, I leave the room because number one, I don't believe in it. Number two, I just cannot stand to listen to the freaking audio later with all that static. But anyway, so somebody asks, let's say we're in this Lincoln room. Do you know who the president is right now? going Cardinal, Obama, and it said Obama, and they got so excited. It said Obama. It said Obama, or maybe it said Barack. I don't remember. It was one of the two. And I'm sitting there thinking, guys, we're a week away from the elections. You're scanning through radio channel stations. You know, if you're going to hear that, you know, ask who's Barack running against. Romney. Oh my God! It was ridiculous, and I'm sorry. You know, I'm probably, if they ever hear this, or it'll probably get back to them. I don't really care, I guess. But you can't use that. You can't present that as evidence.
No,
there is no way.
Well, see, the whole thing is that a lot of ghost hunters, especially the ones that don't know anything about the subject, they gravitate towards pieces of equipment that are easy to get, quote unquote, evidence.
Yes. And then blow it up.
And then blow it up like digital artifacts, you know, from cameras. And it takes me about 2 seconds to realize that, you know, if it's a piece of dust or something. We get sent orb pictures all the time, you know, through our website. It would drive me crazy. And then they would say, "Don't tell me it's dust or a bug," and I'd email them back, "It's dust or a bug." You know, the thing is if you really want to be involved in the paranormal community as a ghost investigator or a paranormal investigator, I don't know what else to call it, if you want to be involved in the community, you need to research the subject first. You need to go back and read first. And I tell everybody that. And don't watch TV. Just don't watch these shows unless you want to laugh at them like I do. Okay?
Exactly.
Because they're not, you know, I mean, one of the biggest cases to come out of the paranormal field in years was a couple months ago, was this exorcism house down in Gary, Indiana. Have you heard about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I heard about it.
Well, what happened is that there's a lot of credible accounting of things that happened in the case. It's been recorded by police officers, by medical professionals. You know, the kid was supposedly acting funny, walked backwards up a wall, flipped himself over his mother's body while he was grabbing her arm. He's like, I think he was 11 years old. Weird things like that is happening. Now, do I believe it really happened? Well, no, of course not yet. But it's just great that there's documentation on this, okay, by credible medical people. So what happens? The Ghost Adventure Cruise comes along, and Zach Baggins buys the house. The house. And you know what he's going to do in that house? He's going to bring out the spirit box. That's what he's going to do. That's it. That's all he's going to do. Break out the spirit box, and he's going to turn it into a television special for the Travel Channel. That's it. And so any good research that might have gotten in, you know, by a credible team going into the house will be lost, because he's going to put an Ovilus in there, he's going to put an SB7 in there, and we'll never know if the place is really or still today haunted or possessed, whatever term you want. And this kind of stuff drives me crazy. Why would people believe that scanning AM and FM radio waves would help them talk to ghosts? It's amazing to me. Yeah. It's just incredible. And believe it or not, I had and I'm not going to say his name. I don't want to. A member of the Ghost Hunters International crew, okay, said, "Would you help me analyze this ghost box audio?" And I said, "What do you mean help you analyze it? What are you talking? Well, just tell me what you hear. I'm going to give you an hour of this, you know, and just tell me what you hear." And I said, "Okay." So I picked out the two clearest voices I heard on it, and I sent it to him. You know, here's the two best voices I hear, blah, blah, blah. So he emails me back and says, "So what do you think? Do you think they're ghosts?" And I emailed him back, and I said, "No, these are radio waves, or they're from a CB radio, or they're from a cell phone, because they're attracting all this, our radio frequencies. That's all they are." And I never heard back from him. You know, that was it.
Yeah.
And a thing about these ghost boxes, for your listeners out there, this is one experiment that you can do that'll just ruin the credibility of the ghost box or the spirit box or the office, whatever. But the ghost box in particular, okay, get a group of, say, 3 or 4 people, sit down and have a ghost box session and have a pen and pencil with everybody right there. And every clear voice that comes in, they need to write down on a piece of paper what they think that voice is saying and not tell each other what they think it's saying out loud, all right? And then at the end of the session, compare notes. And I'll lay you odds that nobody heard the same thing. Nobody.
Exactly.
Right? It's always one person telling the other people what they're hearing, and then that's how our brain forms patterns that way. If I give you an unclear audio clip and say, I think I hear the word Barack Obama here, okay, and if you can't hear, or it's unclear, and you play it, just the suggestion that I've given you to your brain, you will hear Barack Obama if it's an unclear audio clip. See, and ghost hunters are lazy. They don't want to do research. They don't want to investigate. They don't want to find out these things. It's called pareidolia or apophenia. That's another term. So in the EVP field, that's our number one problem, is the perception of the EVP clip. Okay, it's a real mystery how a voice, an intelligent voice that's responding to your question, gets on a recorder. Okay, it's a mystery, right? Yes, it can be a cell phone. In some cases, it can be a radio, but not in most cases. No. And I'll tell you, the one EVP that really did it for me, besides the Birdcage Theater one, is we were at our most haunted house I told you about earlier, and my director Kyle and I were doing multiple EVP sessions, and like I said, I had recorders all over the house in every room, and we walked by the study. It was a study where it had no door on it, and I had a recording device behind the chair. And as we walked by the study, we were trying to urge the phenomena to follow us to the other side of the house. Okay. So I told Kyle, I said, okay. I said, why don't you follow us to your favorite place? And Kyle and I walked down the hall and into another room. When we did evidence review, you can hear my voice saying, okay, follow us to your favorite place. You hear us walking away, and on the recording device in that den, you hear an old man's voice say, in a very tired tone, favorite place, mimicking me. All right? Now, if somebody tells me that was a radio wave, I mean, what's the chances of that? Or a radio frequency? I know it's not. So EVP is real, but you have to get, I understand all skeptics out there, you need to get your own evidence first to believe that it could be real. You have to capture it properly, all right? Get away from anything that talks. It's not going to help you do your job as a paranormal investigator. And the other point is, too, if you bring all these talking devices into a home with clients, it's going to scare the hell out of them because they don't know what you're doing, So that's what I see, a very disturbing trend in the field with these talking devices, and it really bothers me. And there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just hoping that now we're seeing the paranormal craze on television go away. All these shows are hemorrhaging ratings, so they're getting canceled left and right, all right? I'm hoping the public is onto this now. I'm hoping the public is onto these people, because they're just hurting the field. I mean, you're still going to have ghost hunters there. You're still going to have ghost adventures. They're the two highest-rated shows, I'm sure. The other ones are just going to go away, or they'll be on small cable channels that nobody watches, all right? Exactly. But I'm just urging people, if you want to get involved in the field, is to try to do it the right way. Try to do it as scientifically as you can. And what I mean by scientifically is you control your environment. Shut those doors. Lock the windows. Use recorders in every room. Use special microphones, omnidirectional mics that take no batteries. We don't know if the EVP is created in the coil or the actual device itself. We do know that EVP is not conventional sound at all. You will never hear it. Now, you will hear disembodied voices, but you have to prove first that that's a disembodied voice. That's different. That's a physical manifestation of audio. But an EVP you'll never hear. Now, I had one guy ask me last weekend, how come that is? How come we only get the EVP on one device? And I said, well, what do you think it is? Why do you think you're not hearing the EVP? Why? Because it's not sound. It's not sound at all. And he's looking at me like I'm crazy, But it is something to get. If you guys want to get involved with it, you should. We need more people researching it. We need more people doing it. I had a clip. Here's something interesting too. I was at the Vulture Mine in Wickenburg, Arizona. Okay, and we were there to teach the public classes on ghost hunting, and I was going to teach the EVP class. Well, the public and all of our investigators were in about a quarter mile away, and they were getting the lecture from the caretaker of the place. It was closed down. The Vulture Mine was Arizona's richest gold mine going back to the 1800s, and it was closed down in 1942, and it was privately owned, and people let us go in there anytime we wanted. It was great. The owners, they liked us, and we did many investigations there because they had buildings literally back from dating back to the 1800s that are barely standing up. It's in the middle of the desert, 13 miles away from any city, okay? So I'm in the old schoolhouse. It was built circa 1888. And I didn't want to go to the lecture because we needed somebody to watch the equipment, right? And I decided to do an EVP session. And I was just standing there killing time, and it was like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I started doing an EVP session. And about 3 minutes into the EVP session, I asked the question, if there's anybody in here with me, please rap twice on the wall. Well, all of a sudden, I got real quiet, and then something proceeded to walk right past me, invisible, right on the old creaky wooden floor, right to my left and out the door. And at first I thought it was somebody committing, a fraud or something on me, somebody on the roof. So I went out and checked the roof. Right. I got a severe A-frame roof. Nobody's on the roof. I could see the whole roof. There's no basement. There's no attic. I'm like, what the heck? And I checked the desert bushes around there. I'm the only one there. So then we listened to the recording, and it sounded just like heavy-booted footsteps. Now, the problem with that evidence is I'm there alone. I could have faked it, walked across the floor. Nobody would have known, right? Well, we had this video clip checked by this guy. He claimed he was an ex-Navy sonar tech, and he had all this equipment to check audio. And he says, I want to check some of your EVPs because I think I can tell if they're faked or not. I said, oh, really? I said, you want to check the footsteps? Because I would love to see you tell me this was fake because everybody else thinks it is. So he checked the clip, and he called me. He says, I know this is legitimate. I said, really, how? He says, because the sound waves are misshapen. They're malformed. They shouldn't be shaped the way they are when they're pounding on the wood. If it was you, they would have been shaped a different way. So I thought that was interesting. And I'll never forget that experience, even though there was nothing there. I mean, I looked at it. I could just hear it go right by my left ear. I was like, but see, the field is worthwhile, the EVP study, but we need more scientists. We need more scientists to get behind it. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an audio engineer. Guys like Roundtree, there's so few people doing research in the field. But I urge anybody to read Roundtree's book before you get involved with the EVP. He's got specific experiments in there that he performed that shows that EMF has a lot to do with the EVP.
Okay. Now, with recording devices, I have like a $70. Well, one of my recorders is like a $70 Sony recorder. For the microphones, unfortunately, I thought buying ones with batteries since they're more expensive, they would be better. So I have two of those. I have a splitter into the microphone with two microphones, and I clip them on the bill of my cap. That keeps my hands free, and my recorder goes in the back pocket of my vest. So I have hands free for camera and opening doors and making sure I run faster if I have to run. So does it matter what type of recorders you use? I mean, is necessarily, because I'm finding out now with the microphones, more expensive is not better.
Well, according to Roundtree, okay, and there might be some basis in this. He said if you use a microphone that has batteries, it interrupts the creation or delivery of the EVP to the recording device. Okay. Now I didn't think much of that, but I used a shotgun microphone for years. All right, for years, even in our most haunted house, and in 10+ years of using it, I recorded only one EVP. That was it. That was at our most haunted location, but I also recorded what I felt was residual energy at the Waverly Hills. And it's right. We were on the 5th floor that night, and it was like 3 a.m, and you can hear children chanting, but just barely on the audio file coming through the shotgun, and they're chanting or singing. And we found out that's where the children used to play up at Waverly later on. We didn't know that at the time, and you can barely hear. So in 10+ years, that's the only thing I've ever captured on the shotgun. So there might be something to Roundtree's theory that you don't use microphones with batteries or condenser microphones. Okay. He says to stick with the omnidirectional microphones. They don't need batteries. You plug them right in. You turn them on. They don't need any type of batteries. Right. He's had his best luck with omnidirectional mics, and he's got several. He's got a YouTube video up there too, where he's got microphones with EMF meters hooked up to the microphones. How he conducts EVP sessions. But now, take in mind, he's using $60,000 pieces of equipment. It's not like something I can go do, because I don't have the money to fund that. But there might be something to his theory that if you use microphones with the battery, that might screw it up. And of course, if you still use tape and not digital, if you use cassette tapes, you're going to have to filter the EVP. If you use digital, you might not necessarily have to filter the audio. And let me tell you this is another problem we're having in EVP. People are over-filtering their clips, all right? You could actually change what's on your EVP clip by over-filtering. And when I mean over-filtering, all you need to do is turn up the volume on this thing. If an EVP does not stand on its own, it's not evidence. Okay, if you add denoiser and all these other gizmos to make your EVP sound better, you can actually change what the EVP sound is saying. So it's not evidence at all. I hear this over and over. If it's a good EVP, you don't need to do anything. You just pump the volume up on it. That's it. It doesn't change the file. But Roundtree, it's amazing. I read his book, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if I agree with a lot of this stuff, And then in the field, the last 10 years, my evidence supports his theories. They really do. I mean, and I'm amazed to it. So if you really want to study EVP, you'll get paranormal technology and look at his experiments. Especially in the back of the book, he has his experiments with EVP, with mediums, with non-mediums, with EMF. The first part of the book is what kind of equipment to use. It's hard science stuff because he's an audio engineer, but it's a great book to learn. But EVP should not. I mean, I've had my best luck, believe it or not, on the cheap little pocket ICD recorders. All right, I still have them after 10 years, and I've probably captured my best EVPs on the ICD recorders. I don't know why, because the sound quality is horrible on those things. But I seem to get the most interactive EVPs on those. But I've captured them on every recorder I've had, though. And most EVPs you will dismiss. If they're not clear, if your group can't, if they're not, if the group can't hear what you hear, you have to dismiss it because people have to hear the EVP. Just because you think it is something doesn't mean it is. All right. And
that's true.
Yeah, what we do is if I get what I feel is an EVP, I'll send it out to the group. They'll reply to me individually. Because if you hit the reply all and tell other people what they're hearing, they'll hear the same thing, right? That's what happens. So they individually reply to you, tell you what they hear. You give them the coordinates on the clip. Say, I hear something 5 seconds on this clip, on number 5. And then they'll email you back. Then the other person emails you back. And if we're all in pretty close agreement, then it can be used as evidence. But most EVPs are not clear. We had one interesting case that you might be interested in. We had a industrial building, and they were a construction site, and they had an office building connecting to a small warehouse. And the workers, they called us for a case, and they said, look, we keep seeing this little Mexican boy in our warehouse. People will be sawing away, cutting wood or plastic or whatever, and they turn around, they feel like they're being watched. And there's this Mexican child, looks like he's between 10, 12 years old, standing there, and then he vanishes. Okay? Well, we talked to 3 witnesses in there that saw this apparition. So we did an investigation, okay? And we didn't get anything on video. We did an overnight investigation. But I placed recording devices all over the warehouse, in the corners, in the middle. Every 10 feet or so I had a recording device. When I checked the audio, I'll be darned if we didn't have it sound like a child's voice do a direct response to one of our questions during an AVP session. And the question was, is this your home? And about 20 seconds later, you hear a child's voice, and it sounded like, to me, it says, we live in here. Okay? Now, many of the groups heard the first 2 words, but not the last 2 words. Okay? But we still, even though we couldn't agree on what it was saying, ultimately, we played it for the client. And as we sat down with the client, he heard what I heard. He said, it's saying we live in here. I said, yes, it is. That's what I heard, but we couldn't agree on it. Now, guess where I picked up that recording from? The exact spot where that child had been standing all 3 times. I had a recorder right there, and that's where it was picked up.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So there's
that is. It really is.
EVP it's definitely something you should look into, but please do it right. Please, please, please. Don't do it. Don't learn from television. We need scientists to pursue it. people that have greater brains than me, that can, guys like Roundtree. But don't dismiss it, though, as fake, though, because, if I get an EVP that's really good, people don't believe in it anyway.
That's
that
true.
I know that I busted my butt trying to get, But it is important for any ghost investigation, and after 10-plus years, after correlating all the cases, I looked at all the cases we'd done that we actually had hauntings, and we were able to dismiss or explain about 95% of our cases. So we had about 4 to 5% that we had haunted, the actual hauntings that we felt were active. And in all those cases, when we had intelligent EVPs captured at that site, the only one thing that we had coordinated wasn't EVP. We couldn't correlate EVP with EMF. That was out. A lot of people think EMF has something to do with it, all right? But what I did was able to correlate in our group's cases was that every time we captured a good, credible EVP that we used as evidence in the case, there was a report from the clients of object movement at the locations. Always object movement.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. That was just in our case. That's the only correlating figure I had. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you are you up in the Phoenix area? Or are you down by Tucson?
Well, no, I'm down. I'm Tempe, which is right like a couple miles away from Phoenix. Tempe, Scottsdale, Phoenix, right there.
Well, hopefully by the end of this year, hopefully it's going to be in the next maybe 5 or 6 months, I'm going to be moving out to Tucson. Definitely going to have to hook up with you and
absolutely
show me the ropes, if you would, please.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. I mean, look, I take time. We used to train groups. Now our old group, API, Arizona Paranormal Investigations, we pulled the plug on that because we had half our staff that weren't really investigators, that wanted to be experiencers. And then we had the other half of the staff, which were the skeptical people who wanted just to investigate good, credible locations and do historical locations. So we pulled the plug on our group, and we have a new group called Arizona Paranormal Investigators. But our new website's not up yet, but it will be soon, and you can hear a lot of this EVP evidence I've been talking about right there on the site. A lot of these clips that I've talked about, you can hear them and judge for yourself. But
cool.
When you come on up here, we'd be happy to. Like I said, we're conducting research investigations. We had our first one last weekend, and so far we've been capturing some strange stuff on audio. It's going to take me weeks to go through this, but so far so good.
And that's another thing. You're talking about. We are actually recording the show right now. We had our 2 hours is up, but we're recording, and when I download it to YouTube, it's still going to be. We'll have the whole show here when we keep on talking here. But I do have. So if you don't mind, I have 1 or 2 more questions because I'm trying to hone my EVP skills. I've been doing this for. Well, I started out with a cassette player in cemeteries, thinking I heard voices. So it's been that long. But anyway, with I shouldn't even have said that because now I don't remember what my question was. This might be the end of the show.
Well, I can give you some general tips if you want.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody'd love to hear some tips.
Okay, well, we already went over the most important thing is using multiple recorders. You never use one recorder. If you're walking around a cemetery, you have 2 recorders on you at all time. Try not to ever carry them in your hand. Lay them down on a surface if you're doing an EVP session, okay? Use omnidirectional mics. If you can, you don't have to use all omnidirectional mics, but some of the recording devices you should. It's better sound quality, okay? The type of recorder you want, if you can get a recorder that has 44.1 kilohertz, that's basically CD quality sound, okay? You can look at the specs before you buy it. That's what you want, if you can get that. Any recording device can do it. Use digital. It's easier, okay? When you're doing a controlled EVP session, you will make sure all the doors and windows are locked before you do the session, okay? You will do a roll call of everybody's name to see what they sound like on audio, all right? You will tell the people there's no whispering allowed. No whispering, no standing, no walking around. You're just going to have a controlled session. You're going to relax. Do it that way. You're going to have people that are going to report any stomach growls, any cars going by,
right.
anything. They call taggers. They call it tagging.
Yes.
Tagging is important, but don't get too much tagging. Like I know what a plane sounds like going overhead now. I've been listening to thousands of hours of audio for
right.
I know what that sounds like. I know it, but stomach growls sound like voices on tape. Okay, they sound like it. So every stomach growl has to be reported. No whispering. One question every 20 seconds. I've been on how many EVP sessions I'm on. Somebody says, "Who's out there?" And 3 seconds later, somebody says, "What is your name?" And then another guy will pipe in.
Yes.
It takes the phenomena a while to communicate if it's gonna. Okay, so one question every 20 seconds or more. All right. General tips. When you're filtering your audio, all you have to do, if it's not a good EVP, do not use all the filter gizmos to make it a good EVP. All you should do is just pump up the volume. If it's a good EVP, it'll stand on its own. And if you go to YouTube and hear that one from the Birdcage Theater, all I did was pump up the volume. That's it. Okay, and you'll hear it. And those are some general tips. The biggest thing you have to do is don't train yourself by watching paranormal TV shows. Forget those things. Don't walk around bumping into walls. Don't do it. Okay? Just don't do it. I mean, you want control.
I had Andrea Perrone on the show Tuesday night. One of the children from The Conjuring, the house that they lived in for that movie. And I believe it was her and I. No, I believe it was Marie Jones. I think it was Marie Jones and I were talking about investigations. And back in the day, or probably when I started in on this, we didn't have all the paranormal TV shows. I read, Hans Holzer's book. Just that's how we got our start. That's how we got our interest. And now everybody's getting their training from Zach in Ghost Adventures or someone from Ghost Hunters. And that's the way that people now are getting trained. And my God, people, just because they do it, that doesn't make it right.
Absolutely.
There are so many other.
David Roundtree told me once, a long time ago. He's the audio engineer I spoke about earlier. He said that he's been approached many times by producers to be in a ghost show, but they want full content approval of what evidence is.
Right.
So he won't do it because he knows what will happen if he goes on a ghost show. He knows they're going to make him look like an idiot. Okay, he knows that.
Yep.
So we're not getting our best researchers on television. We're not.
No.
And these guys, just because you create something that talks, you have no proof that a spirit is going in there and forming words. And how would a spirit know how to do that? Are they Superman?
Yes.
Do they put a cape on? Are they Spider-Man that can do superhuman things because they're dead? No, they're not. They're just, if you believe in the ghost theory, ghosts are just people in a different form. And I always tell clients that if they're scared. If you think there's a ghost in your house, it's just a person. That's all it is. They're not superhuman. Don't be afraid.
No. But there's so many. Well, this other group I was talking about earlier, it seemed like almost all of their YouTube videos start out demonic voice heard in the house or demonic laugh. And they throw the D word in there, and it's all ratings. It's all just get more people to listen to the YouTube, more people to listen to their, watch their TV show or something. It's almost to the point where I just want to get out of it, and I've had fun, and move on to something else.
Well, the thing is that it'll pass, Jim. It'll pass.
It will.
The people that are watching TV and doing this, they don't last. Because they think there's going to be a thrill. And if you know anything about ghost hunting is the most boring thing to do ever. It just is.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I mean, once you get a hot location, but it's so few and far between. I mean, if you're debunking correctly and you're trying to explain things, you'll be able to do it a majority of the time. But once you get a hot location, I mean, you have to savor it and try to get, to the mystery if you can. And how these shows are hilarious because what they do is they try to wrap it up in a half hour, a 2-day investigation, and tell the owners, oh, well, you have a dead person in your front yard. You're going to have to plant an elm tree in there. It'll drive it off. But, I mean, they, pull stuff out of their rear end. And, I mean, all we do is tell people you have activity. We don't know exactly who, where, what it is, but you have activity. And this is what you can do to control it or try to control it, But it'll pass. But, if you're really dedicated to the field, just hang tight. Come to Tucson. We'll get together. I'll show you some things. We've got a lot of historical locations out here in Arizona to study, and we're going to be doing heck, Jim, you can join us. I mean, we're going to be doing at least 3 to 4 research investigations a year. We are going to do private investigations, but only if they meet criteria, okay?
Right.
And we could do a whole other show on kind of the calls we get, that we used to get, or emails, But hang in there.
I got a camera system and stuff, so.
Yeah, we just got a new camera system. I think we got like 10 DVR cameras, and after 10 years, we only captured one anomalous thing on video because we're so good at debunking everything. But you still need them.
It's nice to have, but we very, very, very seldom you get anything on it.
Absolutely, and
Absolutely right.
We've got a really good group right now, but like I said, we do research investigations, and you're welcome to come along when you get here to Arizona. We'd love to have you. We're going to do the birdcage, and I don't know. Sharon and I've done the birdcage twice since 2007, and both times it yielded evidence that I couldn't explain. Okay, so I think that's ground zero for Arizona. That place really does stand up to, to the mythology that surrounds it. I mean, it really is ground zero if you want a haunting, But
what was the YouTube name of that video, the audio?
If you want to listen to the Birdcage Theater EVP that I captured in 2007, it was, if you go to YouTube, punch in Paranormal Journeys. That's Paranormal Journeys /Tombstone, and it was made by Jeff Belanger. Okay, and Lloyd Auerbach is also in it. It's a short 6-minute video. He goes over the locations in Tombstone. When you see him interviewing Jeff Belanger interviewing Lloyd Auerbach, the parapsychologist, I captured that EVP right behind them. Okay, they're in the basement. And we captured it right behind them. I thought it was funny. And he asked me if he could use it, and I said, sure, no problem. I don't care. I don't want to charge. I don't want to make money from this. I just want to study the phenomena. So if you guys want to listen to that, it's really good. It's real. I had a control recorder down there right next to it. It captured none of that voice you will hear. And we'll have our site up hopefully within the next month, and it'll be Arizona Paranormal Investigators.
Investigators. Okay.
And if anybody wants to email me later on how to do EVP, I would happily give them advice. Just stay away from the television shows and have one universal rule. If it talks, it's bogus. Period.
Yes. Exactly, and I'll email you some stuff that some friends have got and see what you think. But
you know what?
We're going to call
I can email you some EV clips too. I can email you some EV clips, some of my best ones if you want to hear them.
Sweet.
How's that? I think you'll like it. They're really interesting.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go ahead and call this an evening. I want to thank you very much for being on with me for 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's been great talking to you. I want to have you on again because I think we can talk about EVP some more and how to really capture them, and maybe actually have some callers call in. I wasn't expecting any tonight on tonight's show because it's just more of a really informational show. But if we get things stirred up and get some phone calls. But again, Jim, I want to thank you very much for calling in.
Thank you, Jim. I had a lot of fun. Had a great time.
And I can't wait to talk to you again, and can't wait to meet you later this year.
Yeah, I'll be here. Just give me an email, and we'll meet up. And thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it, and I'll go on any time. And, hey, if somebody wants to debate me on the subject, I'd be happy to debate them. No problem. Okay?
Okay.
Especially if they're going to talk about the ghost box.
Oh, my God, yes.
Yeah.
I'll just
be happy to accommodate them. Yep.
Okay. All right, Jim. You have a great evening, and again, thanks for being on.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good night. Bye.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. Well, thank you all for tuning in tonight. The show is a little long. We're about 10 minutes over. So if you're listening on YouTube, you're saying, well, this is taking a little while. Yeah, because we're about 10 minutes over, 13 minutes over. Next week, let's see, on Paranormal Geeks Radio, on April 1st, April Fools, my guest is going to be Mr. Bill Bean. He is a ghost hunter and other things. The first 15, 20 minutes is going to be a young lady named Jennifer Kirkland. She's in charge of the Scarefest road trip that is going to be in Springfield, Illinois in April, which is supposed to be just a small thing, a movie, actually it's a channel, a TV channel, cable channel, is making a documentary on how venues break down from one event and get set up in another in a record time. And so they have Scarefest to do it. So there are going to be some pretty famous people there. I don't know if I'm at liberty to say who's going to be there yet or not, so I'm not going to. But anyway, thank you very much for tuning in tonight. I hope you all learned something. It was both about UFOs and about how to do EVPs. So until Tuesday night, April 1st, you all have a great evening. Love you all, and be safe.
My old man spent his life living off the land. Steady hands and a clean soul. It breaks his heart seeing foreign cars filled with fumes